It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. What should we make of the climate movement's accomplishments over the last decade? On one side, the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS and Science Act helped distribute clean energy across the country. Those policies dropped solar prices 90% over the last decade. Battery storage costs fell by the same amount from 2010 to 2020. But the Green New Deal never passed. Many Republicans in Michigan and across the U.S. are against a clean energy transition. President Donald Trump has consistently said climate change isn't real, and the world continues to warm at a rapid clip. Jay Inslee has been at the center of the climate movement. He was governor of Washington for 3 terms and a presidential candidate in 2020 when he pushed Democrats to take climate change more seriously. What does he make of our climate politics today? The Metro's Sam Corey recently spoke with Inslee when he was in town stumping for Jocelyn Benson in her bid for governor. And just a note, the Metro has reached out multiple times to the campaign for Republican John James for governor. They have not yet given us a time when the candidate is available to join us.
You're here in Michigan stumping for Jocelyn Benson. Why are you supporting her bid for governor?
Well, I am super excited about her candidacy. I work with a group called the State Power Project, and I help governors and governor candidates raise their ambitions and help them identify things that will work in their states to bring lesser cost, cheaper energy to their citizens, cleaner energy, less corrupt energy, and energy that won't pollute so much all at the same time.
I want to talk about climate change, and of course, you're someone who's known for combating climate change, doing a lot on that front. How did you first become concerned about climate change? When did that sort of happen in your life?
In the mid-1990s, I became concerned just because I took to this horrible habit of reading. I started to read about that'll ruin your life sometimes. And the science back in the early mid-90s was so clear as to what we were going to be facing that I started to work on this in a variety of ways. I was in Congress for 8 terms, and I worked on them when I was in Congress. And then when I was a governor, it was sort of an organizing principle around clean energy. And it was a joy to work on these because what we found is that while you're fighting to reduce pollution, while you're fighting to reduce the havoc caused by climate change, you're also giving people cheaper, cleaner energy. They're getting less costs in utility bills. They're getting more efficient school buildings that have less, cost for heating and cooling. So it's a great moment to be fighting climate change because simultaneously now you're getting people cheaper energy sources because these sources that are non-fossil fuel are the cheaper ones right now.
I want to hold, I think, on some of the policies that I think you influenced, policies that fight climate change, particularly in your 2020 presidential bid. You lost that race, but it seems like the next presidential administration took a lot of what you were pushing for, and some of it became the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the CHIPS and Science Act. Those policies have been meant to speed up the rate at which clean energy is deployed in the U.S. In your assessment, how have they done so far?
To the extent we've continued those efforts, they've been very, very successful in restraining the rate of increase of utilities so people can get cheaper energy. Again, it's one of the things I'm excited about. I was talking to a group about this a few moments ago. I remember meeting a woman who she picks apples for a living. She's like in her mid-50s. She gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning in Toppenish, Washington to go pick apples. A tough job, right? But then she says once a month she runs out to her mailbox. And I say, why do you do that? She said, because I rip open my utility bill and read it because it's zero, because we got her some solar panels on her roof. And it has been very successful. Our program was affirmed by voters by a number of 62 to 38 of our effort to give people access to heat pumps and electric school buses that the kids and the drivers love, getting AC and more efficient heating and cooling in our schools. These things have been very, very popular and very, very successful, both economically and for the health of our people.
Yeah, and I do want to get into some of the policies that you specifically passed as governor in Washington. But I am wondering if there are places where you think the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act failed or fell a little short.
Well, had they been allowed to proceed, they would not have fallen short. But unfortunately, the coup plotter that currently sits in the White House and is tearing down the White House every chance he gets, which is going to cost $800 million, by the way, but that's an aside. He tore up the plan, and probably 60% of it will not be effectuated, or 50% as a result of him tearing it up. But the things he has done have been very, very successful in getting people access to heat pumps so they have less cost, getting EV charging station built so that the great products made here in Michigan can be enjoyed by people driving. No, it's been very, very successful. On the job creation, it's been extremely successful. And this is perhaps most salient, it has now given people access to cheaper electricity, because the cheapest electricity in the States today is clean energy, solar, wind, and batteries. The more expensive energy has been the ones that Trump is trying to shove down our throats.
I want to push you on part of this because there are some in Michigan, and I imagine there are some in Washington too, who don't like the aesthetics of wind power and solar energy. And they don't want an EV because they fear they won't be able to fill up on electricity quickly, or that they could get stuck somewhere because they run out of energy on the road. What do you make of the concerns of people who are skeptical and scared of transitioning to clean energy?
Well, we're all humans, and anything that's change is somewhat problematic at times. Change is in our nature, right? We get into our habits and whatever. And just what I have found is that once people look at the practical usages of these, if they don't look at it through an ideological lens, we can make some really good decisions.
But there are a lot of people, particularly in rural areas, who say are opposed to wind power because they don't like the aesthetics of it. They've said the same thing about solar farms. You were governor in Washington and you passed some pretty big clean energy bills. What should, if she becomes governor, Jocelyn Benson do to win over some people who are skeptical and who also are afraid of the changes that the clean energy will take in their backyard, and particularly how it'll change how everything looks around them?
The experience that I've had is that people come to really like these technologies once they see the benefits of them. Once they understand that they have lower utility bills because of wind and solar energy and battery storage, they come to like them. They come to depend on them. They come to be seen as standard operating procedure. Once it becomes part of the landscape, it's standard operating procedure, and it's just like, well, of course, we've always had that. It's sort of like roundabouts, frankly. I remember in Bainbridge Island, Washington, I live on an island, and we wanted to get rid of these four-way stops that had huge traffic every time school let out. So the planners came up, let's build a roundabout. And my God, it was civil war for a year on Bainbridge Island. Roundabout, communist plot, it's going to destroy the island. And we fought for it over a year. 2 weeks after that roundabout was in, nobody thought about it. It works. And the same is true on clean energy.
I want to talk a little bit about, I think, some of the difficulties that the climate movement has had in recent years. It's true that the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act were passed, and while they've been stalled or impeded by the Trump administration, they're still in effect. But a lot of people didn't understand that the Biden administration got these things passed. They didn't really understand the full effect of how their lives had been changed because of these policies. Of course, the Green New Deal was never passed. I know you're a supporter of that. And government at both the state and federal level have really been fighting a lot of clean energy policies, depending on where you are, especially from the Republican side of the aisle. And often they'll say that it raises the cost too much. The transition is too costly. I'm wondering if the climate movement went wrong at all by not focusing enough on lowering costs and by putting too much emphasis on, say, saving the earth and making sure that the environment is clean.
No, I don't. I wouldn't pin the existence of a climate denier in the White House on, quote, the climate movement. I don't find they're responsible for the fact that you have a guy that denies, the basic science, which is so clear cut, and now everybody's experiencing it. Everybody's getting bit by the climate monster right now. In my state, in the summer we burn down, and in the winter we flood, and then we start the cycle all over again. And yet we've got a climate denier who refuses to do anything about it and is consciously, willfully, maliciously trying to stymie the ability to give access to Michiganders access to cheaper, cleaner energy. By the way, he talks about he's proud that he's blockading the Straits of Hormuz right now, but he's also blockading the ability of consumers in Michigan to get cheaper energy right now. Now, that's not the fault of the climate community. It's the fault of a guy who's corrupt in the most basic measure, and that corruption is costing us money. I always think about, people don't like corruption from a moral standpoint, but this is corruption that's costing people money because he's shoving more expensive electricity down the throats, and Benson's opponent would, I'm confident, unfortunately, would do the same thing. So, but there's also something that happened on the cost standpoint where these technologies are so much cheaper now than they were 4 or 5 years ago. It's incredible. Solar has come down 80% in 10 years. Batteries get 8% more efficient and productive every single year. Wind continues to come down. What is happening now is that we have the promise of cheaper energy that becomes cheaper over time, as opposed to fossil fuel industry, which becomes more expensive over time. So what I'm saying is the cost argument now is a lot more salient than it was 5 years ago.
I hear you, and I appreciate that, and it's certainly true. I wonder what you make, though, of the backlash. Do you just think backlash to change is sort of an inevitable part of politics, or do you think there were any missteps that folks in the climate movement made and maybe could have been more strategic in certain areas?
I'm sure we're all human, that if you run the tape backwards, you could find some things, but I don't think in a fundamental way I would not say that. The mistake is not to promote the idea that these systems are less costly. That would be a mistake. I think it's very important for candidates to run on 4 things right now: cost, chaos, corruption, and climate denial. And unfortunately, that's what we're getting from the Republicans across the United States right now. They want to have higher cost electricity. They want to have more chaos with wars that were unprovoked and illegal. They want to have more corruption in every office that you can find. You got a courageous candidate in Benson saying she's not going to take utility money because she wants to be able to stand up for consumers for lower prices. And the pollution now associated with climate change is part of this context as well. So I feel that people are in the right place arguing that, and the facts are with us. So I feel good about where we are on this.
This is the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Sam Corey, speaking with former Washington governor and 2020 presidential candidate Jay Inslee. He's here supporting Jocelyn Benson's bid for governor. We're speaking about that, as well as the climate movement, its gains, its setbacks, and where it should head. Mr. Inslee, one thing I want to talk to you about is something that worries me a little bit in terms of the fight against climate change, is that a big selling point has been sort of techno-optimism. And you talked about this a little bit. Like, look at how cool this technology is. Things like electric bikes and electric cars and heat pumps and solar energy. But the left in general, I think, has become at least a little allergic to technological changes because they often don't like or trust the people running big tech companies. And I wonder, do you see this as an issue in the climate movement, or is this something you don't worry about?
No, I worry about all kinds of things, but I don't worry about that particular one. It has not risen its head as a concern right now. And the reason is because the spectacular success of these technologies. I mean, 20 years ago, if you would have predicted that solar is, 40% cheaper than coal-based energy and almost universally accessible, people said you're crazy. But you had this 80% improvement over a decade of these technologies, which now continues in that direction. These are miraculous achievements we've had in EV technology. We don't lack technology. We don't lack industrial base. We lack political leadership that will put it to work.
What does concern you in terms of gains in the climate movement? Is it simply the Republicans who are climate deniers? What do you think are the big things that are, I guess, pulling us back? Because I do see people who are at least skeptical of making transitions and who are scared of the change. But I'm wondering what things that you see that maybe governors and politicians should look out for and need to navigate well.
We are unfortunately living under a cult, and I'm sorry to say this because I've had a lot of friends in the Republican Party, and I have a lot of citizens that I work well with and I respect, and relatives who are in the Republican Party. But unfortunately, the elected officials, the politicians in that party, are responsive to a cult. It's the cult of Trump. They refuse to confront him. They follow him like sheep. They are afraid to take any stance in any event when it comes to energy that will offend his corrupt bargain with the fossil fuel industry. And as a result, there's really only one group of politicians who can help us advance this cause of clean energy and cheaper energy, and that's the Democrats at this point. I can't wait for the day when there is some Republican leadership on this subject. The only ones to date are no longer in office.
But then what do you recommend Democrats do? Because, I mean, you know this well, like you need a coalition that doesn't just include Democrats to get things passed most often. How do they reach out to Trump voters, maybe convince them, or sort of change the tide, or work with politicians who represent people who are part of the MAGA base?
Yeah, I think there's actually a disconnect between people and the Republican politicians. I'll give you an example. And this is very unfortunate to say because I have tried, over 12 years as governor to develop bipartisan solutions to this, and never had a single Republican in my legislature who was willing to help at all, which is pretty astounding when you think about it. And yet their constituents like our policies. So in the rural districts in our state, when we put these policies up for a vote, where normal folks get to, cattle ranchers and, hay growers like I used to be and everything else, get to vote, they affirmed it. In 80% of all the rural counties, all of the red counties affirmed these policies. So there is a disconnect of a lot of Republican voters and the politicians who are part of this corrupt cabal and cult that Trump leads, and it's very, very unfortunate. So at the moment, the only game in town, if you want cheaper energy, if you want less corruption, if you want to have access to what you want from utilities and clean energy, is folks who run in the Democratic Party. I hope someday that Republicans will offer some solutions to this, but they have not to date. It's very unfortunate.
Jay Inslee is the former governor of Washington and a 2020 presidential candidate. He spoke with the Metro's Sam Corey. A few notes about this conversation. Inslee mentioned a Washington ballot measure on climate that won 62% of the vote. That was a 2024 vote on whether to scrap the state's climate program, the one that makes big polluters pay for what they emit. Voters chose to keep it. He also cited a Washington vote on electric school buses. That wasn't a ballot measure. It was a bill passed by the legislature in 2024. And Inslee said President Trump's White House construction and renovation projects will cost $800 million. According to Reuters, those projects are now more than $900 million. Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Still ahead, Jay Inslee on what happens to climate policy when Washington quits. Stay with us. It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. What should we make of the climate movement's accomplishments? And what should it prioritize today? Former Washington Governor Jay Inslee was once at the center of the climate movement during his time as governor and as a presidential candidate in 2020. Since then, the world continues to warm, and the Trump administration continues to weaken environmental regulations and renewable energy investments. The Metro's Sam Corey recently spoke with Inslee when he was in town stumping for Jocelyn Benson in her bid for governor. He says she's the state's best climate candidate.
You're here, as we've been talking about, in Michigan to support Jocelyn Benson's campaign. you're trying to rally the clean energy business community and environmental groups to support her. What are their biggest concerns right now?
Well, she has tremendous support from these communities because they recognize her leadership on it. She's put out a very, I think, practical but also ambitious plan on try to get cheaper energy. She stood up on data centers to make sure that data centers do not put costs of their energy onto the consumers. She's espoused a willingness to confront utilities in that regard to stand for cheaper energy. She's moved forward on helping people get access to EV charging stations. She's moved forward on community solar.
Jocelyn Benson has said that government needs to be a guardrail on data centers and that the centers can't come at the expense of the environment.
We have to ensure, while we welcome the increase in well-paying union jobs, we cannot allow those developments to come to Michigan at the expense of our environment. We have a moral responsibility to protect our water, to protect our Great Lakes, to drive down energy costs, and require transparency and community benefits agreements and accountability from not just data centers, anyone who would want to set up shop in one of our communities.
You yourself have welcomed data centers to Washington when you were governor. I guess my first question is just why?
Well, historically we have, 8 or 10 years ago, actually, and frankly, some of the things are changing because of the cost implications, the water implications, and the power implications. Right now, what I think Benson has done that is very wise is to put a plan together to make sure that the costs of energy to power these, and they are enormously eager for power. 1/3 of all the increased electrical usage in the United States in the next 10 years is going to be just data centers. I mean, it's an enormous appetite for energy. And she has said basically that she will make sure that the state protects consumers from cost increases associated with the additional production of energy. That's the first most important thing. She has also said that she wants to have a very transparent community-based decision-making to make sure that you understand the consequences environmentally of these things, which do involve pollution, to make sure that you are aware of that and you make fundamentally sound decisions where you can have cleaner energy if it's accessible.
I guess I'm wondering if you think that data centers can coexist with clean energy policies. And I ask this in part because 2 years ago, there's been reporting that data centers, specifically in Grant County, Washington, have potentially jeopardized the state's ability to reach its clean energy goals. I guess I'm wondering what you make of that reporting and if you think it says anything about whether data centers can completely disrupt the clean energy goals that a lot of states aspire to.
Well, I think data centers can be an effective tool to help us economically in other ways if capital IF, it follows certain principles. Number one, it does not expose the other ratepayers to costs associated with increased production that they have to pay. Two, that they don't create additional pollution that adds to climate change in a meaningful way. Three, that they don't jeopardize your water access to clean water because they have enormous water usages as well. And it's the job of governors, and I'm convinced Governor Benson will be up to this job, to satisfy, in a meaningful way, those three requirements. And water is an important issue, too, as well in Michigan, as you know, and particularly in some rural areas. So those are three guardrails, if you will, that it's up to governments and states to protect people in this regard. And it's possible to do that. This is an ongoing drama in my state to make sure that we fulfill those three mandates when they do go in. And there's ongoing debates in my state about this to make sure we keep those three promises.
Do you think they should be paused if reporting is showing that the clean energy goals will be violated? I mean, we have these mandates here in Michigan as well to run on clean energy by 2040. If in 2029 we've gotten, a lot more data centers and we have the right regulations in place, but a couple years after that, we start to see that it's looking like we're not going to be able to meet our clean energy goals because of these things. Should we have some measure in place that pauses them, that shuts them down? What do you think should be in place?
I think this is a state-by-state issue. It depends on how rapid your progress can be made. Can you make enough progress legislatively and through executive function to guarantee those three guardrails can be achieved? Then maybe you don't need a pause. But if you can't achieve those things, then you do need a pause until you can. So I guess what I would say, and again, I don't speak for the Benson candidacy right now, is that you can use a pause if you cannot achieve those three guardrails. And what I've heard Benson say is that, she's willing to consider some of those things to make sure we can achieve those three.
Do you worry about them in the state of Washington right now? Do you think that they might violate the state's clean energy laws?
Yes. First off, they will not be able to violate ultimately because the law is the law and it's going to be followed. So there may be litigation, but one way or another, this law is going to be followed. And we have proven that this law is stable. It has political support across the states, including in red counties. So I think I'm very confident the law is going to continue, but there could be a litigation in that regard if people try to test the law.
I want to close by talking a little bit about your time as governor. You got a lot done in that time, especially when you had a majority of Democrats in the state legislature. As we've been talking a little bit about, you signed a bill requiring Washington's electricity supply to be entirely coal-free by 2025 and carbon neutral by 2030. You established a cap and invest program that limited carbon emissions from big polluters and put that money into clean energy investments. And you imposed strict energy efficiency and performance standards on commercial buildings. I'm wondering if you think times have changed at all. I'm wondering if you think it's harder to lead on combating climate change now than it was about 5 to 10 years ago.
Certainly not in my state. If anything, it's easier because of a combination of the blessings of clean energy because it's so cheap. I mean, we now legitimately can go anywhere in the state of Washington and said, we have cheaper energy for you these cleaner sources. That's an easy argument to make. And it's easier now than it was 5 years ago because these technologies continue to go down in price because of technological advances, number one. And number two, the horrific impacts of climate change are now, people are suffering statewide, recognizing we have to deal with this problem. So no, I don't believe it's more difficult. I believe it's easier. Now, it's harder because we don't have a federal partner and we have an enemy and a friend of corruption in Donald Trump who is making it more difficult. I'll give you an example. So we were going to create, clean steel with hydrogen, and he illegally has cut off these grants to the state of Washington, and I presume Michigan has the same thing, that can really create jobs making, green steel using hydrogen. And he illegally tried to cut off those grants. Now, we got an injunction last week because we got a great attorney general, Nick Brown, to enjoin him from those illegalities. So it's harder from that perspective. But I always think it's really important, and I talk to governors across the country about this. States can do about 80% what needs to be done through state action that Trump cannot stop. He cannot stop us having more efficient school buildings. We have the ability to make that decision. He cannot stop us from getting electric school buses for people. He can't stop us from getting heat pumps from people. He can't stop us from building EV infrastructure. So we have enormous capability of moving the ball, and I'm convinced we are, and we're going to elect a lot of governors based on this issue.
But what needs to happen politically? I don't believe that if Trump goes away, that MAGA necessarily goes away. And I think there are others who probably believe that as well. And I think that leaves a big question because since our politics is so national, even at the state and local level, because everybody gets their media nationally now, there's a big problem that a lot of state and local actors have to contest with, which is those ideas stick around at the state and local level. You called MAGA a cult. I guess, what do you do if you're a politician who believes in fighting for clean air and clean water and this transition to cleaner energy, but you need to win a majority and you're fighting against a lot of folks who don't believe that? What do you do? How do you form a coalition? How do you get things done?
Well, first, I want to make sure you understand the cult I'm referring to is the politicians. It's the people in Congress.
Donald Trump himself.
It's Donald Trump and his lackeys, his lick spittles in Congress. It's the politicians that are a cult. That's where the real problem is. If you sit down and have a discussion with your neighbor who might be a Republican and you just bought an EV and it works really good, that's not a problem. So that's where the cult is we should be concerned about. Look, we're not going to have unanimity on something that's so profound as a change to a clean energy economy. You're not going to have unanimity. You're still going to have people who don't like solar energy because they don't like looking at a solar panel on their neighbor's roof. Still may bug them. I don't know. So you can't expect unanimity. What you can want, desire, and expect are legislators and governors who will stick up for common people, that they don't get ripped off by corrupt schemes to shove coal-powered, expensive energy down their throats. And we can have that if we will elect candidates like Jocelyn Benson. And I'm convinced that she will be successful in that. I'd bet $1 to a donut she's going to get elected, and she's going to succeed in fulfilling that mandate.
Jay Inslee is the former governor of Washington and a 2020 presidential candidate. He spoke with the Metro's Sam Corey. One thing to note, Inslee said that 80% of rural voters supported a clean energy ballot initiative in Washington. We couldn't verify that. It's the Metro on WDET, and you can help shape the future of our sound. Our annual listener survey is open now. It's quick, it's anonymous. Let your voice be heard. We are community powered here at WDET after all. And the listener survey is one of the best ways to share your thoughts on the station's programming. Take the survey today, WDET.org/survey. That's WDET.org/survey. In local news, Ypsilanti Township passed a 180-day moratorium on major electrical infrastructure projects. Trustees are trying to pause the University of Michigan's plan to build a high-performance computing center, otherwise known as a data center, near the Huron River. The moratorium comes 2 years after U of M announced the complex would include its own research center and set aside a large part of the Los Alamos National Laboratory. And across the river, beyond the border, Canada says it will match new U.S. tariffs on some of their goods, dollar for dollar, beginning in a few weeks. The Trump administration imposed 50% tariffs on roughly $20 billion worth of imports from Canada on top of existing tariffs. And speaking of the economy, gas prices have fallen 11 cents a gallon since last Monday. AAA says Michigan drivers are paying an average of $4.14 for the cheapest grade of gas this morning. It's $4.21 a gallon in Metro Detroit, 2 cents cheaper than last week. Coming up on the Metro, we'll continue discussing Michigan's environmental policy and explore how some are reacting to Enbridge's Line 5 oil tunnel getting another green light. Stay with us.